One of the things I need you to do for me there on the floor that, has been a fascinating story during this election. I'd like you to track for us the results in Ward 10 in Matatiele, where the four brothers were running. It'll really be interesting to see how they have done. If, those results have been called, to see which of the four brothers, one was representing the ANC, the other the EFF, another one was representing the AIC, another one was an independent candidate. I'm very interested to see how they've done.
Actually, you just raised a very important point, and we will have to, keep a close eye on that leaderboard there, and get back to you as soon as we have that information. But of course, we will continue with your analysis thus far.
All right, thank you very much, Mxolisi. That's Mxolisi Masango there, who was speaking to the PAC as they talk about how they are expecting a slight increase when it comes to their performance in these local government elections. You would have seen there on the screen as well. It looks like they have scored a seat in the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape, and they say that they are expecting a little bit more of the results to start coming through to paint a picture exactly of how they are going to be faring. And also the ACDP not letting things go, saying that in fact it has managed to get some seats. You would have heard them speaking to Flo there. But as we are really looking at what these numbers mean, then that we are inching closer to some coalition agreements where we found ourselves in 2016. Lots of difficult conversations had to be had behind closed doors, last-minute betting, as those kingmakers were putting their best foot forward to try and ensure that they are, in fact, as secure as possible when it comes to these coalition agreements. But fast forward to 2021, we are finding ourselves in a very difficult position as political parties ahead of the election were saying that they are not willing to be in coalitions, others saying that they're prepared to be in opposition benches, while others face the reality that they may need to knock on the doors of some smaller parties in order to try and govern some of these interesting metros where we are seeing a hot contest that has been unfolding. And I still have with me Levi Ndo, as well as social commentator and political analyst Obapsoli Masilela. One of the things that we were talking about is the importance of these agreements that are going to need to be taking place. But I'd like us to just backtrack a little bit, Ndo, because when we looked at what had transpired ahead of this election, we saw political parties having different messages when it comes to the possibility of coalition governments. Others saying that, no, we can talk about that at the end of the election. Do you think they had enough time to reflect on what it'll mean to get into a coalition agreement, arrangement once again? Because for me, the messaging was clear. We want outright majorities. We want to rule, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen. Have they reflected?
Well, I doubt if they did. But I think as a responsible leaders, one would have expected political parties to have done a reflection. But if you look at the sentiments that are being raised, especially by the Democratic Alliance, they seem to be a party that regrets ever participating in some of the coalitions. Hence, they've been able to come outright to say, we will not enter into a coalition with the EFF, for an example, because I think of the experiences that they might have actually had. But it is in the ambition or in the nature of a political party not to think of coalitions when you campaign. A political party should focus on ensuring that they take over government, become government, so that they are able to easily implement their own policies whilst they're in government. And obviously, when you are co-governing, there might be other obstacles that might prevent you from implementing your own policies outright. But I think as parties were preparing for elections, and also in the next few days before councils are actually being constituted, political parties must sit down and do a very serious reflection on how they've actually fared in the coalition, how they've performed, look at the disadvantages of being participants in the coalition, look at the advantages of being participants in the coalition, and then be able to map out a way forward. And of course, it is not given that political party A might then be chosen by other political parties in order for them to form a coalition with them. There are a number of things that they are going to look at. They will look at the convergence in terms of ideology. They will look at the character of a political party, whether they'll be able to work closely with them. But in the main, it will also depend on those that are given the responsibility to negotiate, how they will be able to come up with the best deal that will actually, at the end of the day, make coalitions work, but also to ensure that services are actually being delivered to the citizens.
Now, Ntate Masilela, when we look at, the difficult position that the ANC finds itself in, I'd like us to zoom into eThekwini, for example, where the party obviously was talking about an outright majority, but we know in 3 different metros in 2016, things did not go as planned. Now, some projections are suggesting that it might just have a showing of 42.3% in eThekwini. This is a very difficult position, should it happen in that way, because this is one of those metros where it really enjoyed much support. How much of a factor do you think the incarceration of the former president had on this, that also then saw us see as a country a moment that was either described by others as an insurrection, as not as an insurrection, others saying, no, it's the incarceration of the former president. How much of a factor do you think this became in KwaZulu-Natal, where we also saw the emergence of the IFP?
You see, one of the reasons of the low voter turnout came as a result of the internal wrangles within the ANC itself. Rational members of the communities who analyzed things progressively so opted to stay away because they don't want to be part of, or rather a product of such a situation. One cannot say that the issue around the former President Zuma, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, has never had an impact on the outcome of the results in terms of, you must remember, within the ANC, as the president of the ANC, you are popular by being measured by the outcome of elections in most cases. And the ANC, the factionalism within the ANC is so entrenched that there are some members within the ANC who will sing hallelujah when the ANC doesn't even reach 50% thresholds in any province. That is how deep-rooted the factionalism is within the ANC. And with the president, you must remember that the other thing which we need to take into consideration related to the ANC is that I've said previously that the ANC is surviving because it has elected, to a certain extent, President Cyril Ramaphosa as the president. He's the one who is being able to, for now, keep the ANC, the coherence between the ANC and the populace per se. The issue, you see, this issue of patronage within the ANC, patronage to an extent that some members, and what is strange, Bongiwe, is that some of them are highly learned, but they cannot separate governance, the wings of governance, judiciary, legislature, and all those things, to an extent that they wouldn't want justice to be applicable to some members of the ANC. That is the saddest part of KwaZulu-Natal as we speak now, because some members of the ANC, and you must imagine, Bongiwe, if members of the ANC in KZN are disgruntled simply because of the former President Zuma, to an extent of saying that the ANC can just dissipate or remain in a state of instability for the longest period. Members of the ANC, then what about the broader members of the community who must vote for that particular party? In most cases, these results are a reflection of the inner wrangles, the push-pull force. The president who's trying to say, I'm renewing this organization, and my renewal program or project will be based on values upon which the ANC was founded, will be based on the legal framework of the country. Corruption will be referred to as corruption. Any person who has been alleged to be involved in corruption must face the judiciary. That is the situation. So it had a negative impact, particularly when you look at the fact that these elections came immediately post the unrest which happened, deadly unrest which happened in the KZN.
Now, Mr. Ndo, one of the things that, that Obama Selelo touched on is the fact that you measure a leader's performance by their results at the polls, right? I want us to look at a different political party, the DA. It's been on a downward trend. It appears to be, where projections are concerned, to be on a downward trend again. We saw a panel review being set up when Mmusi Maimane failed at the polls.
Yes.
It was quite brutal.
Yes.
And it was honest about the dismal showing at the polls for the DA. Can we expect the same now? Because when I was checking some media reports, the leader of the DA is blaming Mmusi Maimane, saying, no, his departure from the party did hurt the DA somehow, and he walked away from the job, which signals then that he says he's failing as the leader of the DA. Based on these statements, based on the DA that is showing a downward trend, can we or should we expect a panel review to check how John Steenhuisen has done in this election and possibly take some serious decisions?
Well, I think the DA also has to do a lot of reflection. The trouble with the DA at few stages. The DA brought back Helen Zille into the national leadership, which actually culminated in the resignation of Herman Mashaba, who spoke a lot about the right-wing extremism that is actually coming in the Democratic Alliance. And with the support that Herman Mashaba had at the time, it actually had a dent on the DA. The DA took a very progressive decision, in my view, when they decided to have a policy conference. And it was after that policy conference that Mmusi Maimane had to leave the Democratic Alliance because of principled decision based on policy positions within the Democratic Alliance. And the panel that was established to look at the performance of the DA, and all fingers pointed at Mmusi Maimane, might have been an instrument that, in the view of the Democratic Alliance, might actually assist the party to move forward. And you would then expect the Democratic Alliance to be very consistent in terms of their approach towards leaders based on the election results. And if the DA cannot be consistent, they might then face a situation where some might start saying that there are certain leaders in the DA who have been purged based on race, and it was actually not necessarily based on results. So my expectation is that the Democratic Alliance must undergo the same process. And if indeed the reasons for the demotion of Mmusi Maimane were based on performance, then we will expect the Democratic Alliance or Steenhuisen to be exiting the leadership of the DA in the next few weeks.
So it then makes it difficult for, if you listen to what Mr. Ndo is saying, it makes it difficult then for the party, should it not do what he says it must, to argue this non-racialism stance,
Yeah.
policy stance that it has, that it doesn't see any color.
Exactly.
It'll make it very difficult because we've seen report after reports in the media suggesting a purge of black leaders.
You know, the Democratic Alliance, Bongiwe, is faced with a very huge challenge in terms of finding its balancing act between the right wing and the left wing position of the whole political spectrum. The reason being the emergence and the strengthening of the Freedom Front Plus, which begins now to eat ordinarily its voters. And they thought initially that that was because of the positions and the postures which have been undertaken by Mmusi Maimane and other black leaders. But these elections are proving otherwise. I agree with Prof that to be consistent and to say to voters, look, we are a party. I mean, those recommendations which are contained in that report, which led to Maimane resign, they are also applicable to the current leader if fairness is applicable in the DA. Anything except that, it will then confirm the allegations and the perceptions that DA is a racist organization. I'm interested to realize what is Helen Zille going to handle that particular issue moving forward. Hence, Steenhuisen was very jubilant today because he won a municipality in KZN. He was trying to offset that particular notion, which and a perception. Actually, it's not a perception; it's a factual information that we are having. That what applied to Mmusi Maimane, the reasons behind that investigation should also be not even initiating another investigation. Those reasons and those recommendations are daringly exposing themselves now, and we'll wait and see how the DA is going to begin to manage that particular issue.
And one of the things that Masilela talks about is the difficulties in balancing the right-wing extremism as well as left-wing. Some have suggested that this difficult position, and I heard him talk about it as well, is that it might be because of the votes that the FF Plus has taken from the DA. But when you speak to the DA, even to this day, yesterday my colleagues were talking to them, they are still adamant that the FF Plus is not eating away at their votes. But when you look at the situation in Cape Town, they may, according to projections, win it with an outright majority. But you now have the Good Party, which was contesting for the very first time, which they should be concerned about. You've got the Patriotic Alliance, which they now should be concerned about as well, in the Western Cape. How secure are they in this position in the Metro? Because it looks like they may not find themselves in an easy position come the next election.
Well, indeed, it will require the leadership of the party and there's the strategies to be able to reposition the party in a manner that it continues to be a dominant factor, especially in the Western Cape. But if you look at the performance of the DA generally and how the FF Plus came into being, especially in the previous elections, there is always a say that there has been a section of the traditional voters of the Democratic Alliance that felt that they are being sidelined within the Democratic Alliance because of the wide net that the Democratic Alliance had actually decided to have in bringing a lot of voters within the fold of the Democratic Alliance. Remember, Mmusi Maimane would always emphasize that the Democratic Alliance is a party for all South Africans, and his strategy had to focus mainly on the black voters, which to a certain extent, if you look at the campaigns of the Democratic Alliance, they would actually focus on predominantly black areas or black townships, because that's where they actually wanted the votes. And if you have the coalitions in Tshwane, and in Johannesburg, it was because of the efforts that were made by the Democratic Alliance under the leadership of Mmusi Maimane. And when he was elected in 2014-15 in the conference of the Democratic Alliance, Mmusi Maimane said he's going to ensure that the Democratic Alliance becomes a dominant factor in the metros. And that actually happened. But the Democratic Alliance should then be seen as a party that is going up and actually moving. There was also this important statement that Mmusi Maimane made also after he was being elected, that we are moving towards the union building each step that we actually take. And if now we're going to see the Democratic Alliance not taking steps forward but taking steps backwards, it will then require them to look at the leadership of the Democratic Alliance, come up with the same committee that they actually established when they felt that Mmusi Maimane has not performed well, and one would expect them to take decisive action against the leadership, as they've actually started doing so in the past.
Now, when you look at some of the parties, the smaller parties, and I mean, we can't call the EFF a small party anymore because it's now one of the three big political parties in South Africa. But others are saying that it's enjoying its status of being kingmaker in these metros and not necessarily looking to govern just yet. Do you also get that sense?
I do, Bongiwe, but I picked up something when the CIC Malema started coming up with an alternative that he wants to share municipalities in terms of governance, the Gamina Gawena type of a situation in the politics. Then I started realizing that maybe the appetite of testing themselves in government is now starting to encroach within the Freedom Front, within the EFF itself. As to whether that will come to fruition, we'll have to wait and see the negotiations and all those things. But again, it then demonstrates that political parties doesn't take their constituency seriously in terms of the mandate which they give them. I mean, I can imagine if the ANC standing as it is in terms of the results about Tshwane, it then decide to say, we give you EFF this Tshwane to run and give us Johannesburg. What about the voters? Those are the things which are importing disgruntlement within the whole political situation in the country. But if I can touch also on the challenge which is facing the Democratic Alliance, Bongiwe, if you allow me, you know, not every leader and every member of the Democratic Alliance subscribe to liberalism. We shouldn't miss that particular point. You do have those verkramptes within the Democratic Alliance. I suspect the sin of Malema was to start bringing within the Democratic Alliance the heritage of leaders like Nelson Mandela in his song and all those things. That then started to unsettle the traditional voter base of the Democratic Alliance. Balance that against the emergence of the Freedom Front Plus, then you will see that the numbers are merging when coming to that. But what the Democratic Alliance missed in this whole process is the value which Mmusi Maimane, Johannes Mashaba, being as they are, diverse as they are in terms of leadership, they were bringing to the Democratic Alliance in terms of getting voters from voting areas or districts traditionally not belonging to the Democratic Alliance.
I want us to look at mandate when we come back, because the voter turnout is a concern. So what mandate do these coalition governments have? Because it looks like a weak mandate if a majority of the South Africans did not come out in their numbers. But let's